So what time is it on the Timeless Watch channel? It's time for a little Q&A. Darren Taylor says, do you think that when taking an order for a waitlist watch, the ADs should take a deposit of maybe $1,000? And if they did, what do you think the effect would be on the current substantial wait times for key pieces? I don't know if giving a deposit makes any sense. I mean, if you're serious enough to give $1,000 and you want the watch, you should just pay for the watch outright. Recently, Paul Thorpe has made a video about just like paying for the watch up front and then just waiting until it arrives at the AD. That makes a bit more sense, because if you're giving a deposit, what's the deposit for? You only take a deposit if you're afraid the person's going to back out. And in the interim, you will have told other people, sorry, it's sold. But you know, if a person backs out on a key piece, on a wait list piece, it's not really going to cost the AD anything. They'll pick up the phone and call the next person and sell it immediately. Or worst comes to worst, they stick it in the window. You know, you imagine putting a Pepsi or a Batman or a Submariner date in the window. It would last about 60 seconds. Having said that, paying for the watch outright could come with some caveats too. I've kind of pondered that one also. Like, if you pay the full amount for the watch, then they have your money and they don't have to try to look for your business. They've already got your money. And I fear that some ADs might get up to some nasty business and kind of maybe not give you the watch when it arrives. Maybe if someone more important than you wants the same watch, they might give it to them and just never tell you that it arrived and make you wait longer. You would need a very honest AD to turn down other business when he already has your business, you know what I mean? Robin Guinness says, do you think one day you're going to get into Patek or any of the other Holy Trinity dress watches? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I'm headed in that direction. I think anyone who's serious about watch collecting and has a little money to put into it is headed in that direction. That's kind of the end of the yellow brick road, if you like, you know, whether it's 20 years away or whether it's around the corner. For example, the Daytona, I didn't think I would ever get so soon. Now I have one. It might happen sooner than I expect, but either way, I'm definitely getting there. James Blackman asks, what are my thoughts on vintage Rolex? Do you have any, or would you ever get any? Well, that's a whole other world, obviously, and you have a different set of caveats, not least of which I would say would be the fact that, do you know it's fully vintage, that it's fully the original watch? A lot of these pieces somewhere along the line wound up in a service center, be it the Rolex center itself or, you know, an independent. And quite often, a lot of these parts got replaced. You need a very trained eye to spot when, you know, a vintage Submariner, for example, has had the dial replaced or the hands replaced or whatever. It might not be so obvious as they're nice and shiny and new and the rest of the watch isn't. It could be a lot more subtle than that. You kind of have to have a trained eye with these things. I don't know if I would buy one. I would, first of all, they're very expensive in some cases. If they are 100% original, that's a big boys game right there. That's what a lot of these big mega collectors do, is they're much more interested in vintage pieces because they're very hard to find and they're very, very expensive in some cases. I think I would probably need to be 100% sure. It would need to be a particularly interesting piece, and I would need to have a fair amount of money that I don't mind, you know, spending on it. You know, the resellability of a vintage Rolex can be tougher than selling a new Rolex, you know, a fair bit tougher. You have to wait for the right kind of person to come along. You could be sitting on it for years if you wanted to resell it. I always liked buying a watch knowing that if I dislike it after a month or two, I can get out of it fairly easily. Chris Franklin asks, what are your thoughts on the GMT Master 2 BLNR with the new Jubilee bracelet? So he means the Batgirl. That's what people have been calling that watch, as opposed to the discontinued Oyster bracelet. I'm just about to buy one and I can't make up my mind. Do you like the watch in general? It's funny you asked me that, Chris. I just met up with a viewer here in the square. He was passing through the city. He's originally from the same city, and he reached out. He had just picked up a Batgirl from the authorized dealer. We both agreed that the Batgirl is not that impressive. It doesn't feel particularly well constructed. One thing I noticed on the one I just saw last week and on the one I saw in the AD, I tried on in the AD a few months ago, was the bezel, turning the bezel, it kind of grinds slightly, which to me feels like a cheaper watch. It kind of, you can feel a little bit of scrapiness happening under the bezel. And then I had my 116710 on, and I turned that and it was creamy and smooth. And I thought, I just had the worst possible feeling that perhaps Rolex have kind of lowered their standards slightly. I mean, I know that's a huge thing to say. It's a pretty heavy accusation. You know, Batgirl, some people don't like that phrase. I actually think it's very appropriate because it feminizes a watch that had a masculinity to it. With the black and the blue and the oyster, there's a masculinity, a heaviness, a heft to that watch. And the Jubilee kind of feminizes it. Peter Richard asks, what was your very first wristwatch? It's a really good question. I think it was a Casio of some sort. I must have been 10 years old. I think it was some sort of black plastic Casio. It wasn't a calculator watch. It wasn't one of those. Everybody in my class had one of those, and they always had pen all over them because the little calculator buttons were way too small to really get at with your fingers. So you'd use the tip of a pen, and of course ink would come out. So everyone in my classroom, it felt like, had a calculator watch with like blue, dirty, filthy buttons all over it. I think I got some sort of kind of chunky sports Casio. I don't really remember, but I remember having something, and I think I do remember that I bought it myself. That I do remember. It wasn't given to me. So on my video about the different watch collectors, Brian Chalmers says, hey, thanks for a very interesting video. Cheers, man. I'm definitely a 12 watch guy with a core of about 8. So you're kind of like me, probably, somewhat. Oh, and I was wondering where you got the Omega art piece that's behind you in the video. So you mean this thing? I love it, and I recently bought the Moon watch. Yeah, I got this thing on Etsy. I got the, it's from Art of Horology. They're really cool. They have lots of different prints like this of various different watches. And I just put it in an IKEA frame. I got this frame for $5 in IKEA, and it just worked perfectly. So yeah, go on Etsy and look for Art of Horology. You'll find lots. Matt Davidson says, great vid. It's funny, many of these channels are nerd dominant. It's true. It's good to hear a normal point of view. I always wonder whether some of these guys are aware of the opposite sex. Okay. Look, if you have a watch channel, you're probably a watch nerd. You know, you probably are somewhat of a watch nerd. I mean, I can't think of many that aren't. And, you know, what would you expect from a guy who has a watch channel, or a gal who has a watch channel? You have to be a bit of a watch nerd to have a watch channel, so yeah. Duckman says, who's the guy that loves watching this channel about watches but doesn't have a watch? Oh boy. But I'm thinking about a Seiko or Omega. Help. Okay, Duckman, if you don't have a watch and you're watching watch channels, I don't know what to say. It must be very frustrating. Having said that, though, I can tell you one thing, that people who have a lot of watches and collect watches and have a nice collection still yearn for that next watch. In a weird way, you've avoided that problem thus far, because, you know, even if you have the most gorgeous pieces in the world, you're always thinking about the next piece if you're big into watches. And if you're looking at someone's video and they're showing that watch that you don't have yet, in a weird way, you're kind of like ignoring, you're disregarding all the beautiful collection that you already have, and you want what you can't have or what you don't yet have. So you may have you may have inoculated yourself to that problem, or you know, you may be immune to that because you don't have any watch. So you're kind of like, you know, you're not ignoring any of your collection because there isn't any collection. So in a weird way, you might be in a better position than some of us that have this sickness of collecting watches. As for getting a Seiko or an Omega, you can't ask me that question, Duckman. You can't ask me, should I get an Omega or a Seiko? Because Omega is a luxury watch brand. The cost is up there. I mean, it's up there, at least. It's like, you know, you're gonna spend like at least 2,000 on one used. Whereas Seiko, you can get a beautiful Seiko for $400 or $500 or less in some cases. So it's like asking me, should I get a Porsche or should I get a Volkswagen Golf? You know, they're not, you don't compare those two things together. I mean, if you ask me, should I get a Rolex or an Omega? Or a Tudor or an Omega. Now we've got equal or roughly equal things, price-wise at least. Or should I get a Seiko or a Hamilton or something like that? You know, but, you know, if you have 3,000 to spend, you might find a great Omega used with box and papers on eBay for 2,500. You've still got 500 left. You can go and buy a brand new Seiko, so you can get both and wear one some days and one the other. So don't be thinking along the lines of, should I get Seiko or Omega? That's like saying, you know, should I go to the movies tomorrow to see a new film that came out, or should I fly to Beijing? You know, well, you should do both probably, and they shouldn't be compared to one another, you know. About my Bassano video with the 114060, Watcher's Journey says, let's do a Timeless Watch Channel meetup in that cocktail bar. You're on, man. I'll go to that cocktail bar anytime. All I need is a good reason, you know, and you'll find me there. You better be ready though, because, you know, I can put back a few drinks, as you may have noticed in the video. But if you're up for it, I'm down. So Mathew O'Grady was asking if the Milgauss is going to be discontinued. There are rumors that it may be discontinued or revamped in design slightly. And also if I thought that the Explorer 1 could be on the chopping block. I'll start with that one. I don't think the Explorer 1 will be discontinued. It's a very, very, very popular watch. And Rolex don't put popular watches on the chopping block. So the 116710, the LN, the Espresso GMT that I have is popular now that it's been discontinued, but it's easy to forget that before Basel World of 2019, nobody really wanted the watch. Everybody was after the Batman or the Pepsi. So that can be a sign to when they're going to discontinue a watch. Is the Milgauss popular? Actually, the Milgauss is fairly popular. It is kind of an odder, quirky Rolex and so on, but it has its audience, it has its big fans. Will it be revamped? That may happen. If you ask me about the Air King, however, I think the Air King is skating on thin ice right now. It's not a popular model. I've seen Air Kings in shop windows, and I've tried it on, and it's not a great Rolex. I don't know how they missed the mark on that design so badly, but I mean, everything, it looks kind of like really messy on the dial. It's not an attractive watch. I was offered one at a discount in the AD and I turned it down. On the Sea Dweller video, Hugo Hernandez says, I've never been a fan of two-tone watches, but they look absolutely stunning in your video. I think two-tone is beautiful. I don't think there's a problem. I don't have the issue that everybody else has with two-tone. It's just, I don't have the issue. I love stainless steel watches, that's great. I really like the fully gold watches. Unfortunately, some of those are they're just super, super expensive, and they're all gold, so they're all very soft metal. There's something about that just doesn't sit right with me. I like the idea that there's the strength, the durability of the steel, but then the glimmer and the shine and the elegance of the gold. It just works. I mean, can you guys really tell me that the Daytona in Venice that I showed you guys doesn't look good? Can you tell me that Sea Dweller doesn't look good? Can you tell me the two-tone sub that I showed you guys in Padova? You think that doesn't look good? I mean, these are beautiful, beautiful watches. I've heard of many tales of a guy who buys a steel Submariner because everybody else has one. He even buys a Hulk. They're very difficult to find, but he's disappointed with it because it's somehow a little plain, and he was expecting a Rolex to really glimmer in the lights, you know. And a lot of people go then for the two-tone. They can't quite afford the fully gold watch. Remember, the difference with a two-tone watch, it's a few thousand more. It's not 20,000 more. It's not 30,000 more. So going all the way to completely precious metal can be just a little bit far. Until then, I love two-tone. It's gorgeous. And you know what? It's a great thing. If everybody wants to hate on two-tone, it's fine by me. I got a great price on that Daytona. I got a discount on the Sea Dweller. And what's my other two-tone? Oh yeah, the Sub. I got a good price on that too. And that's going up now. So I think if you're into the two-tones, you should grab one while you can. Because maybe in a year, it'll be back in fashion. Get them while you can, guys. They're beautiful watches. Jeremy Pitotti says, complimenti. Grazie, Jeremy. Another fine haul. One thing intrigues me is your placing of timepieces on the floor and filming as people appear to nonchalantly walk by. I love that word, nonchalantly. Cazzo, do that in Rome. He's speaking half Italian, half English, something I do all the time. This is great. Cazzo, do that in Rome and you'll see it disappear before your eyes. As good old Tommy Cooper used to quote, just like that. Yeah. That's amazing. That's an amazing thing you just said, because my father passed away 12 years ago at this point, more maybe. Was a big fan of Tommy Cooper, and he always used to say just like that. So that kind of just hit me that you mentioned that. God, the memories. I think a lot of people walk by and they have no idea what I'm doing. Like, you're seeing it through the wide angle lens and the watch looks huge and very obvious with the background. But a lot of people, they don't realize what I'm doing until they've passed me by. Robert N says, you know, man, watching your channel has gotten me into nothing but trouble. First, you hypnotized me into buying the Yachtmaster 40. I'm glad I did. It's a beautiful watch. And now you have me talking to my AD about this one, the Sea Dweller. Look, I'll tell you what I think is beautiful. The problem with a lot of these watches, when you see them in the photographs, or you see some reviews with horrible lighting, or you just look on the Rolex website, they don't really look like much. And you keep hearing about the Sub, the GMT, the Sub GMT, and so on. I guarantee you, if you go into an AD and they have a Submariner and a Yachtmaster 40 and you try them both, I guarantee you the Yachtmaster will be a prettier, more attractive head turner of a watch. You might buy the Submariner because it's a little cheaper. If you can get it at list, you should definitely get it for the investment value and the rarity and all that. But you're actually picking the less pretty watch. Make no mistake. Matt Stevens says, cheap Barolo or not, always decant it. I don't know. Always decant a wine? I don't know about that. I know people who are avid enophiles like myself who don't like to decant. Depends what kind of wine. If it's a very old wine, you might want to decant it because it needs waking up, because it's been asleep for so long. And then some wines are quite new and need the interaction with the air, and you have to kind of do that splash decanting when you literally turn the bottle upside down and let it all splash into the carafe, just to shake the wine up a little bit. But I think I've enjoyed many great bottles from the bottle, even though they cost a lot of money and they should perhaps be decanted. I don't know if they get necessarily better with decanting. There's a question mark above that. I don't think you're going to damage a wine by decanting it unless it's a very old wine and it's on its last legs and it only has minutes before it's going to turn and you're literally catching it at the very end of its life. Then you don't really want to decant it. You don't want to do that because you don't want to risk breaking the wine, if that makes any sense. Anyway, I knew there'd be a wine question in there somewhere. Thanks for the question, or for the statement. You go ahead and decant your wines. There's no harm in it in most cases. Wesley Slippers says, green plastic box. It's about the Sea Dweller. Yeah, they're still giving the old green plastic box. I think at this point it's just a staple. It's a symbol at this point. They can't really, it's just them, you know. It's like Sony changing its logo, or Pepsi Cola changing their font. Wouldn't that be weird? It would take us a long time to get used to something new. At this point, I mean, I used to lament about that particular thing, especially with Omega and their beautiful boxes. I'm not just talking about that huge NASA box for the Speedmaster, but just the regular brown wooden boxes. They're so elegant, so beautiful. And of course, those Patek boxes, oh my God, they're so gorgeous. Yeah, you think at this point, Rolex would have done something about that. Clearly, they don't have to. Otherwise, they would have. All right, guys, that's it for now. I hope I got to your question. If I didn't get to your question, write to me on Instagram and say, hey, you totally forgot my question. I'll get to it, I promise, in the next Q&A. As always, if you're a supporter of the channel, if you're a patron, I get to your questions first. You guys get priority. It's just the way it is. I've got to give something back. It's the least I can do is get to your questions. And thank you so much for your support of the channel. A new review coming up very, very soon. It's going to be quite a different one, and excited. I'm very excited about shooting it. So look out for that. I'm going to go off and shoot it in the next couple of days. Then I'll need a couple of days to edit, and then I'll hit you guys with it. So once again, thank you for watching the Timeless Watch channel. I will see you in the next one.